the swath grazing deal, it's a winter feeding strategy, and it's kind of I like because there's not a lot of inputs involved. My wife likes it too, because otherwise all summer, because we have our weekend warrior hobby farm too, and we're always making hay, and it was getting out of control. And so I kind of got into this, and I have some family in Canada. It's my wife's side actually, and it's a big deal up there. And I figure if they can do it in Canada, we can do it here. Probably a lot easier too, because they have 2 feet of snow. We get a little snow and it goes away. A little snow and goes away. So that's what we've got going on here. This is the first year that's been done here at the McNay Research Farm. On campus, we're in our 4th year. It's been working very well, and I think that's going to be a mainstay there, because it's just the time and effort for winter feed has been eliminated. It's really worked quite well. And I say, so after we're done in here, we'll go out to where the cows are, and we can see them in action and see what they look like and get into it. So these slides, I have a couple slide sets, but this one's just dealing with the McNay situation primarily. And what you see is there's about 22 acres out there that we set for this. There was some hay with some fescue grass, and Logan and company, they whacked that off and made a first crop of hay off of it. And then we burned it down, and then we planted some pearl millet into that stuff. And they planted it at the end, and then when that happened, it kind of quit raining. And so things got kind of dry, but we use the summer annual because we kind of hedge the bets. We use sorghum and millet. They take the heat and the drought pretty well. So it's a good thing we did that. In Canada, they like using triticale and wheat, winter wheat and stuff like that. But here we kind of got to hedge our bets a little with the hot summer. They did spray Roundup on that hay ground, then they planted it, and they put some ammonium sulfate, and turned out to be about 24 pounds of nitrogen per acre, what it equivalent was, okay? And it was no-till drill. So, and then that's what it looked like in August. It was kind of suffering because it was so dry, but it did okay. I mean, we still had quite a bit of feed out there. And we just left it grow all summer. We were going to initially take a cutting and then let the second crop come back, but because it was so dry, we just left it. So we took one cutting. It was planted in, let's say, the end of June. It was cut around Thanksgiving, after Thanksgiving. And we still had 3.1 tons of dry matter per acre. And here was our rainfall. We had 9 inches of rain from the day we planted till the end of the year, and 4 inches came before September 1st. So that's really what it grew on. We got our 3.1 tons with 4 inches of rain, which worked out all right. So like I say, we kind of hedge our bets. You see the windrows are pretty big. Ashton pickup truck parked there, and you can see the windrows are big. We rolled about 20, 22 feet of stuff together to make the windrows. And so that's kind of what we did. So that was our hay making for the year. And then we turned the cows in. So on that patch, that 22 acres, there's 49 cows in there. They've been in there since December 7th. And they're all part of the registered Angus cows that go with this farm. Here are some of the dimensions on those cows. Before we turned them in, we weighed them and got some data. So the average weight was 1309. That's kind of that's what their just scale weight was. They didn't, no adjustments. Here's the range, 1,000 to 1,500 cows. Average body condition score was 5.1, and the range is 3.4 to 9. There's one chubby one in there that had a lot of fat, but the 5.1 is the average. Ribeye area is 10.7 was the range. Fat was just over a quarter inch. Back fat was our range, 7.85. That was our chubby cow. And then the age, these were mature cows. The average was 7.3 years of age. The range was 5 to 14-year-old cows. So that's what we got out there. So there's some old ones out there, and they held up one. I think they lost one because she had hardware disease, but stuff like that happens. So turn them in. That's what it is. You'll notice we have these this Gallagher tumble wheels. We're using that to kind of split them. So we didn't turn in the 22 acres. We give them about 2 to 3 days of feeding. Then you'll roll the wheels ahead. At Christmas time, they give them 4 days. So things to do other than chase cows around. So over the holidays, they give them extra, no big deal. They seem to do well. and just let them do their thing. Here's the forage analysis of this millet. Now this was just cut once. It was planted in June, cut in beginning of December, so after Thanksgiving, with crude protein and all that, blah, 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 it's all there. It was about 6.25% crude protein, so it's nothing stellar. There it is. That's the available crude protein. It's highlighted. Okay, so corn stalks are about 2 to 4%. This is at 6.25, so it's better than corn stalks by quite a bit. The NDF, a lot of fiber, 71% fiber, which can be good, can be bad. In this case, it's pretty good because the digestibility of it was running 60%. Okay, so a lot of times the fiber run maybe 40%. This was 60%. And part of it's from the variety we chose to plant. The other is that during the cool weather, it does become more digestible. So there's quite a bit of energy in it, even though it doesn't look very good. It's nothing like, 200 relative feed value alfalfa, but it's more than adequate for the cows that are in this stage of production. Now these cows will be calving in mid-March, and they haven't had any supplementation all winter. It's just been on the, like I say, we'll go take a look at the cows when we're done here. Here's the energy. Here's the non-fiber carbohydrate, so 12%. That'll be your sugars and starches. And a lot of that's coming from the heads because there was some seed heads made in this stuff because we only cut it once at the end. So that was back in when we first cut it. So now the current quality, this was from 2 weeks ago. The protein is still, if you look over here at 6.1, before it was 6.25, now it's about 6.1. So we really didn't lose nothing in terms of protein. That held up very well. And I say the colder it is and drier it is, the better your quality. It's just like rain on hay in the summertime, it'll leach it out. So we've had a lot of precipitation and then it would leach. And now, like last week we had snow, now it's all gone. And that does leach out some of the good stuff. But still, it's quite a bit better yet than corn stalks. So it's not the worst thing in the world. In Canada, it gets cold and stays snow. It's like putting vegetables in the freezer. So it holds the quality a lot better. But here it's still not bad, especially for cows at this stage of their life. The fiber was at 71, here it's at 65. And what's happened is a lot of the digestible stuff does leach away. So if you look at the digestible NDF, before it was 60, right now it's running 48, almost 50. So I mean, it's went down a little bit, but it's still nothing probably to worry about too much, okay? And then there's our energy and NFC values, okay? So I'd say the quality does kind of holds on pretty good, and the drier and the colder it is, the better. So when it's warmer like this, that's when you lose your quality, but it's easier living for the cows, so there's a trade-off there. On campus, from 2 years ago, I collected a lot of data. This was on a two-cut system, so here we planted it. It was early June, then we took a cutting the end of July, and then we got the regrowth, and then the regrowth we used for swath grazing. And we kind of, this was sorghum on top, and millet on the bottom. Like the sorghum started out at 19% protein in October when it first grows. Then we swathed it in December, it was 10. Then it kind of went up actually a little bit because we lost a little carbohydrate, 11. So that's just the protein. The millet actually holds on to the quality a lot better than the sorghum does. So like in October, it wasn't as high, it was 14.1, but instead of dropping in half like it does with sorghum, it stayed pretty close. There was about 12.9 or 13, lost about a point. And in January, it was 97, and it starts going up because we lose some carbohydrates. But then what I did at the end is, as you'll see out there, you'll see where the swaths laid. A lot of that freezes down, so the cows can't get it all pulled up. But then I raked up what was left over just to see what kind of quality was left that the cows wouldn't eat. And that stuff is pretty much like sticks and stones. The protein is way low. The energy is pretty well gone, okay? And there's a lot of ash involved with that. So it's just as well the cows leave it lay there. There's just nothing there. See, they pick out all the good stuff like they normally would. And they say the stuff that does get left behind is really junk. So it might as well stay out on the field, which is nice that way. And I say this was from a two-cutting system from when we had enough rain on campus one year. But I say this year we just got one. So this is the cows here a couple weeks ago. We had some snow. I did some yield estimates out there. I said I had about 3.1 tons of dry matter per acre. And we know how square the field is and everything from the crop map. So we kind of estimated about 35 pounds of dry matter per cow per day. And so then we moved the wheels ahead to give them 3 days worth or whatever days worth of feed. That's kind of what we've done all winter. And there's no other supplementation. They just cleaned up the swaths, and these swaths, they kind of stick up and the cows can find them. And that's kind of the key. I mean, you can get 2 feet of snow and still Swath graze. It's not a big deal. And the Canadians, when you ask them what's the maximum, they'll say 4 feet of snow because they've been through that. And they'll get the tractor and they'll push away so the cows can get started. But then they'll go to town and clean up. 2 feet they can find pretty well. On campus, the best we've ever had was 1 inch of ice and then 1 foot of snow on top. We chased the cows in and they found it real quick. So I've been waiting to get a big snowfall to see what they really can do here, but so far that's the deepest it's been. And let's see, so these cows that we have here, they'll be calving in mid-March. And so I say it's about time, when you get about 3 weeks out, then you'll probably want to supplement them, because I say the forage isn't that great, but it's adequate till you get about 3 weeks from calving. Then you may want to give them some treats. So that's what will be happening here in a week or two. Now, as far as utilization, and this is kind of what sets swath grazing apart from just other grazing. We may do some intensive rotational grazing and stuff like that in the summer. And in the winter, we may have the stockpile. And on campus, they did a lot of that years ago. And the best they could ever get was 60% utilization of that forage. Most of the time, it's 40%, because you start getting snow and it gets trampled, it's just hard to get at. But the Canadian data, before we started, I did a little research what they were getting 65 to 90% utilization of the feed. Their windrows are about 3 feet wide, 18 inches high, so they're pretty big windrows. And they had 0 to 2 feet of snow cover, and that's what they were getting in terms of utilization of the forage that was there. On campus, when I measured it there a couple of years ago, we were getting 70% utilization. And our windrows were quite a bit smaller because it was a second cutting and it quit raining. We got 1 inch of rain and that was all we got. We got about 1.5 tons of dry matter on that regrow with 1 inch of rain. And we had quite a bit of mud and ice and a foot of snow on top of that. And we still had 70% utilization. So it's about double what you would get if you were just trying to stockpile graze and put cows out there. And that really was quite helpful on campus because we were always short of hay on campus all the time because we did a lot of stockpile grazing in the past. And this worked out a lot better. So we were hay rich after that. In the spring, this is a picture from campus, and we'll be able to see what it's looking like here. But we just started to green up, and these cows were on this patch all winter. We had 36 acres that they were running on campus. You can't even see where the windrows were, they're gone. And that's really kind of a nice feature because if you're a farmer, you can no-till right into that again. And this system that we use has been designed kind of to use in a crop rotation. So you can go corn, soybeans, corn, and then put in your cover crop like rye. You can graze the cows on that in the spring and calve on it, and then go in with your summer annual. And then that next winter, you have feed for the cows on that. And I say you can get a lot of tons. You know, I just had 3.1 tons with the drought here, but in reality, you could get 7 tons of dry matter on that, especially if you can get it in early and catch some of the early rains. So it's kind of why we kind of looked at it, because on campus, that land is pretty valuable. It's $300 an acre rent kind of stuff. So we kind of got to get maximum production out of it. And this is one way we can do it. And I say the next year, you can no-till right back into it without any muss, any fuss. I say the cows don't really dig it up at all. And you'll see here too, it's been fairly warm. It should be all grubbed up, but you keep moving the cows every couple of days. And so I say they keep ahead of the mud, and it's really not been a problem. So it's been working quite nice. From campus, this is that where I had the 2 cutting system. We measured, I say part of the reason was there on campus, we have a labor issue. Sometimes we shouldn't, all the students, but you don't always want to work. And let's say that the land is so valuable. So anyway, we just kind of looked at what it costs versus the baling, because they had records from the past and all that were in the stockpile grazing. You see, our big deal is we got 70% utilization of that forage, so we had about 81.8 cow days per acre. That's kind of our baseline. If we would have baled it in the past, we'd get about 85% utilization to get it all picked up. But there's some feeding loss and grinding loss. They feed those cows in a bunk. And so there's some loss there, but we would have got 98 cow days per acre. But from all the handling and manure hauling, and grinding and trouble, we still were ahead about 27 bucks an acre by swath grazing, just because of all the grief that you deal with in the winter time handling feed. Back to the stockpiling days, looking back at some of the data from there, we would probably got 46 cow days per acre, about 40% utilization if we would have had the same snow cover that we had this year. And so it would have cost us a little bit more. And there's a lot of the grief of handling feed in the winter is gone, but just the utilization pulls it down so much. So that was.
Is that the same type of forage you're comparing the stockpile to, or you just compare that to a perennial type?
Yeah, so this stockpile was primarily fescue, clover type of deal. So, but the tonnage here was about the same as the swath grazing. That was the year we had, that was the derecho year that we did this, and it was just the regrowth. We had 1.5 tons of dry matter this year, and that's about what we would have had if we stockpiled it. We would have let that go. So the forage quantity is about the same in most situations.
It is, but your annual would stand a lot better than your.
Generally, so yeah.
So I can see where you're, if you would compare it to grazing, stockpile grazing the same, and that would be higher.
It could be. It could be.
I don't know if it would be the same.
Yeah.
The
thing about these summer annuals is they're cows like to strip the leaves and trample a lot. So I'm not sure if your utilization would change a whole lot from this year's stockpile grazing. Another thing is these like fescue, it's actually pretty good forage in the fall too, and they're looking for it. You know, we're in this summer annuals, they look for the leaves, and like the sorghum they like early. There's still a lot of sugar in it, and they select it because that year we did this, we had the field split. We had sorghum on one half and millet on the other half, and we let them eat both. They'll eat the sorghum side first, then they'll come eat the millet. But
I'll tell you what's better.
yeah, there's no can't go over their eyes. But so I'm not sure how much different that would be if we would have the same variety plant out there. But I think it'd be pretty similar to this. You know, they've done some, grazing of summer annuals here at this farm, and there's a lot of trample loss. They just like to sort around, look around, but where it's in a windrow, they kind of got a big dig in, and so they don't waste quite so much. So that's very nice. Now I say with the bale feeding, we were about 85%. We could have 98 cow days. And so this year, this is on campus too. We're measuring the difference if we had them in a lot versus the stockpile. And here our carrying capacity is way less than that because there's so much waste from the bale feeder. So in about 2 weeks, I'll have that answer for how much less it is because there is a trial going on. But we don't have any bedding to haul, any manure to haul. We don't have mess like that to clean up. So let's see. We'll see what it all turns out to be here in the end. I'll be collecting this data here at this farm this spring, but from campus, we were collecting data there from that 2021 season. There's 86 cows that were in part of that trial. And of those cows, there's one calf that was born early and died. So I don't know if the cow got bumped or what happened. We lost one calf. But all the rest of the calves lived. And there was only one assist out of all those cows. Now on campus, that's been an issue because a lot of those times, if they're not on the stockpile, they usually run out and they got to go into the feedlot. And those cows just stand around and, I don't know, look stupid. But they seem to have a lot more calving problems. Since we've been stockpile grazing on campus, last year there was one assist, this year it was 2 years ago, there was one assist, and that was it. And it's been a big significant improvement over what had been in the past. It seemed those cows that were in the yards, there was always calves that had to be pulled and you had to have somebody there. And it's been pretty hands-free since then. I don't know if it's just the exercise that the cows are getting is helping, or what, but it's made a difference. There's one calf that was kind of a dummy. I don't know if he's born slow or backwards. We did have that, but he was born by himself and he lived and he's okay. There's a set of twins that was born by themselves, no problems there. They say everything was, other than that one assist, everything was hands-free. And another thing with calf health has improved a lot on campus because those cows always ended up in a yard. There's a scour issue, and that's gone away too because the cows stay so much cleaner when they're all, and that would make sense, you know. And the subsequent pregnancy rate following year from the same cows was 95% that were confirmed pregnant. So we didn't make them suffer too bad. They seem to take it all in stride. They do seem to look more athletic, you know. I suppose there's not as much flesh on them, but I say that it really hasn't set them back. It's actually, I think, improved matters quite a bit there. So they say those cows that were in a lot, they always get dirty, and the calves, they seem to suffer for it, and it's gone away. So there's always those issues about like water, because they need water and stuff like that. That's one of them. And this here is water consumption of the cows you'll be seeing here. And the line down here is 0 gallons per head per day. And this is 2, 4, 6, 8, okay? And this is from when we turned them out December 7th until 15th, last week the 15th, I downloaded the last days, or 16th. And it's every time it's down here, it's just, it rained, they don't drink, here it snowed, it snowed a little bit in between, they went way down. They say 1 or 2 cows could probably make this look drink, but you can see they really haven't drank much. So this here is the average. It's about 3. Oh, here was 4 gallons per head per day. Here it's 3 gallons per head per day. Okay, so they really don't drink much water out there. And see if you got snow cover like here, they really don't need any water. They're finding enough out there. And even just a rainy day, there's enough that soaks up in the feed that they don't seem to. The biggest day was the first day out there. That's maybe because we scaled them and ultrasounded them and chased them down the road, and they were in a new place. So then they drank 9 gallons that day, but ever since then, it kind of was down. So really, the water issue hasn't been much of an issue. So if you're kind of wondering how that would be, the Canadian data say you don't have to give them any water, but they get a lot more snow. So I thought we'd see what we have here. 2 things to consider is this does work nice in a corn bean rotation, and it can work even better if you go with the corn beans, or put a cover crop in, then you can calf those cows on the rye in the spring, and then when the rye gets kind of beat down, you come in and you put in the summer annuals, then you got feed for the next year. And I said then you can go right back into your rotation again, because I said there's soil compaction, the surface damage has not been an issue, and on campus we no-till right into it. Doesn't seem to be an issue at all. And that's flat, black ground, a little bit of clay. So if there's going to be a problem, we should have a problem there.
Back fencing at all?
Nope. No.
So they just got access to the whole field?
The whole thing, yeah. And I think that helps with our utilization because a lot of times, you know, especially if you get some ice, those windrows freeze down a little bit, they'll take off the easy stuff and then it'll thaw and they'll come back and clean that up. So that's worked out really quite nicely. And then we use just one source of water and they just go back for it if they need it. I say the thing about sorghum, we use sorghum and millet on campus. And the sorghum really seems to smother out weed problems. If you got a weed that you can't kill, that really is, especially if you get it in early, it really just wipes it out. It just chokes out everything that's there, which is kind of nice. It makes a nice clean field in the spring again, like that one picture I showed you. It also seems to break some of the corn rootworm cycles and cyst nematode cycles. And my little brother kind of got interested real quick about this too, because he's got a problem with the nematodes. And so I say some of these crops can work in quite nicely to take care of some of those issues. They say you can no-till into the residue in the spring because there's really no residue left. And the thing I think that makes it work better is if you kind of make the big windrows and you rake it together and make them big. That way, if you get a heavy snow, the cows always can find their feed. And it cleans up the field pretty nice too. So it's the cows eat where they should eat and they don't really trample much. Couple things to consider with the one cutting system like we did here, and we've done that this year on campus too, you can expect reseeding to happen because I say these plants will reseed themselves. So if you don't want that to happen, you consider the two cutting, or pick a variety that's not likely to make a lot of seed head. So something to keep in mind. You will get a lot of wildlife moving in if you do the one cutting system. The pheasants came back to town in Ames, and that's why with Charlie, he said he's got a lot of pheasants here too, because they like the seeds, so they will eat those up pretty good. If you do the two cutting system, and I said we've done it both ways, you just got to keep it the cutting height. You got to keep all 3 nodes so the plant regrows. If you get below that, it probably won't come back. So just something to keep in mind with that if you do a 2-cut system. And I say with the 2 cutting system, you can get a lot better quality forage. So if you need some good forage, and then do a 2 cutting. You can take that first cutting for hay, that in case you do need hay, eventually you'll have it. And I say then the stuff that regrows will be double the quality of what the 1 cutting system is. Okay? The 1 cutting system does seem adequate, for cows that'll be calving in the spring, just that you may need to supplement about 3 weeks before. The other thing is sorghum and millet aren't the same kind of beast out there. The millet does hold its quality a lot better than the sorghum. The sorghum will leach out the goodies easier and faster. So if you do have both out there, graze the sorghum first, then your millet second, because just keeping the quality intact is a big deal.
When you figured out how much tonnage you had on the first, like that actually cut and actually had a windrow, did you try to do like an estimate of how much tonnage was standing there first before you cut it? So if I want to go back and try to figure out how much acres I want to cut for my cows in utilization, is there a way to try to figure out how many acres I can cut?
You could do that. Yeah, I whacked it all down, or the farm help whacked it down for me. Then I went out there and I just took 3-foot sections of the windrow and measured, but you could do it on a stand. Just cut out your patch and then weigh it and get a dry matter. And that's all you really need to do. But you can feed a lot of cows on, like I said, we had 49 cows on about 22 acres. They've been out there all winter, and there's still some left, and they'll be running out pretty soon now. But if you consider how many acres you got to make hay, it really works out pretty good. It makes it pretty productive, and that was only half a crop. It was only 3.1 tons. And like sorghum, if you fertilize it and give it a good chance and get it in early, that you get all that June rain and even some May rain, you'll be at 7 to 8 tons of dry matter. And you can feed a lot of cows with that, especially if you can get that kind of utilization, 70% utilization versus 40. So it's a big deal. I guess the other thing too, a lot of people get a little bit hesitant because you don't have a perimeter fence. You spend all your life taking some fences out, or you put a fence back in. But that's one thing we noticed on campus. The field that one picture I had, it has a fence that was built there in 1950, and it's there, but it's really not there. It's not much holding. There's really only one hot wire that holds them in, and then there's nowhere else to go in the summertime, so they don't push the fence. There's no calves out there, so the fencing thing really hasn't been too bad. Your electric fence though, it's harder to get a good ground though, and when the ground is hard and frozen and dry. So we got the same kind of fencer they use at the Des Moines Zoo to keep the lions in is what we use on campus. It seems to work. We haven't had the cows get out yet. And they say we use just that one wire, those Gallaghers, to keep them from advancing, and they don't push that too hard either, which has been nice.
Does that roll in the wind this couple weeks?
A little bit, but not too bad. Not too bad. It's pretty good. A lot of times they kind of stick into the snow and that holds it, and then when it's like this, it doesn't take much and they can get held up. And moving them isn't too bad either. On campus here, Brad and Logan can tell you what their system. On campus in town, the students do it. They just take one student and they hook one end and they just walk to the other end, just kind of let the wire rub against them, then you can slip it on. I have a little video here I can show you. So they feed their 80 cows or 90 cows, whatever they have out there, and it takes them 2 minutes, which is nice, and that's good for 3 days because they move about every 3 days on campus. The project that's going on here, there was some funding done by the Illinois Beef Association, and what we're doing is, so we have these cows here, plus we got 2 groups on campus. We're kind of looking at this water consumption thing, you know, are we abusing our cows if we put them out there all winter? And so water consumption is something we're measuring. And we got some pretty good numbers coming from that. We're kind of looking at man and machine hours, you know, how much time are we saving or losing by doing this versus what we may have done in the past. And this just kind of looking pretty good. It looks good enough that my wife is interested in doing this. So that's a good sign. The feed and bedding use differences. So I say we're looking at total bales being put out for feed versus, you know, what we fed here, you know, the waste, you know, and we estimated 85% utilization before on campus. The farm manager's saying, I think it's quite a bit less. And if we use bale rings, it's going to be worse. So it's going to be about the same for use. But we don't have any bedding. We don't have any manure to haul because it's really been a big deal. With the group of cows here and those on campus this year, we're measuring body condition score change to see if they're suffering much or not. So we did ultrasounding at the beginning of it, and then here in 2 weeks we'll be ultrasounding again as we kind of transition them to calving to see how much body condition they've gained or lost while they were out there versus those, you know, we have treatments on the swaths and we have treatments in the yard. We'll be measuring the difference if they've suffered much or they held their own. And then of course the calving and then the breed back on these cows because you got to get the whole picture involved. So it's looking pretty good at this time. So this is the 4th year on campus we've been doing it, and the farm manager there says it's going to keep doing it now. And he's actually here, and I'll let him talk and give you some his ups and downs because he's been in on it from day one. And I say Brad and Logan too. They're rookies at it, but they've adapted quite well. So anyway, that's kind of what we got going on here. Next week I'll be at the Iowa Forage and Grasslands, and we'll be going through some of the data that we've collected on campus over the last few years. And I say in a couple of weeks we'll have all this data with this year's campus data, and we'll pull that all together and see how it looks. But it's really been quite nice in terms of a labor saver. It just to make hay is kind of a challenge, especially because a lot of times when you got a cow herd, you got other things going on. It's usually not the #1 priority in your life, but it sometimes needs to be, even though you can't. And so this has been nice in terms of making feed because you don't have to make it till everything else is done. It's as far as labor goes, you know, every 2 or 3 days the wires are moved here. We went 4 days. It wasn't the end of the world. We got through Christmas, could enjoy Christmas and still take care of the cows. I have some friends in Eastern Iowa and in Illinois that are doing it too. And there they don't even bother with the brake wire. They just chase them in and forget about it. So I don't know if their utilization is better or worse, but it works for them and they're happy by doing that. So I'd say there's more than one way to skin the cat, but this is what we've been doing. And I say we've been trying to get, you know, real good utilization of the feed. And I say the animal health seems to be very good. And I think there are some genetics that are better or worse for this. The Angus cows seem to hold up very well on campus. The Simmental's not as good, but I don't know if it's cow families or if it's just, you know, breeding back for a gazillion years. But there is some differences there, but the Simmentals are still there. They still have a calf. They still breed back. They're still in, day out. So there may be some little things there. There may be better cows for it, but it helps have an aggressive eater because they got to dig into the snow, and that doesn't seem to be too big of a deal with cows. With heifers, they're not quite as aggressive, so that might be more of an issue. I know that we talked about doing some other projects coming up here. We're looking at some peas this coming year. We'll see how that works. We have a fall herd on campus. David's here. He'll maybe talk about that a little. And he's tried a little bit of swath grazing. There we've swath grazed some corn. It's some Canadian corn. You can plant it late. Makes a cob about. Actually, I got one here. Makes a cute little cob like this. So a cow's gonna have like fun-sized candy bars on its corn cobs. But and actually this corn, it's really quite nice. It seems to be pretty resistant to a lot of earworms and stuff that were eating the other corn on campus. And the quality is fairly good too. The digestibility is about the same in terms of starch digestibility. The protein's a little higher because there's just not as much starch in the kernel. The germ relative to the starch is a little bit different proportion. But it's something you can plant in July, August, and still have ripe grain. It's like a 40-day maturity, 45-day. It's pretty quick. So there's some other odds and ends out there that can add to the mixture. So David, if you want to talk and tell them, or Logan, I'll turn it over to you guys.
I don't have much to talk about. Well, I think just people have questions, like, it's just an answer.
Did you have a, when you measured the compaction, was there like a strip that you didn't have cows on? That yield again?
Yeah, so the compaction, this fall, David and I, we had the Vicky John soil compactor. We went out there and we just went through the whole field. You know, we had some land that was never grazed. It was corn and bean ground forever. You know, we measured where we hit the compaction. We were on land that had been grazed before. And then we had some places where in the past, David would have his feeder wagon out there and the cows would have their heads through and they'd stand there and eat through that. You know, that's where we had the heavy duty compaction. Most of our land on campus, the compaction was about 18 to 24 inches down. That was from heavy equipment from years ago. The top surface, that was nothing, but you get to about 24 inches, then it redlines because of the heavy, because we spread a lot of pig manure on that ground over the years, and it heavy tankers, I think, and it did a number. And then so we had some corn and bean ground that was just up the hill that Iowa State just kind of picked up recently. And that ground versus the cow ground, there's no difference between our compaction when we went in with the throw.
The only compaction we found on that was that 18-inch hard pan, and I would imagine a lot of that was probably from years past, either ripping in unfit conditions or, you know, from applying manure. What we did learn on that was that the millet tends to not tolerate that compaction in a drought year nearly as well as the sorghum crop would. But that's what we've seen on 2 years of kind of severe drought. So we're just kind of learning on it. We'll keep measuring compaction on it though and see what we can find. Any top layer compaction that we'll usually find, like Garland said, will be where we fed with feed wagons in the past, where prior management was, or in like an old hayfield. If we're gonna go into an old hayfield sod stand, we might have a little bit more compaction than normal in the top 6 inches.
But yeah, we really haven't had any issues where our cows have been in the winter. And the other thing is mud, you know, so the previous cow calf person at Iowa State, Daryl Strobing, he always was skeptical about it. I mean, this has been around for a while. It's been used in Canada out west quite a bit, but never around here. And I see some Stro, why didn't you were cow calf back for 35 years? Why didn't you ever do that? You know, he's all the mud. I just couldn't put anybody through that, but that's really not been an issue for us. And I think a lot of this, you know, every 3 days they get some new stuff to eat, and the cows are always moving around. If you make them stand and eat at a bale ring, that's a different story. Then they'll be mud deep, you know, their belly deep in the mud. But in the situation where, you know, every 3 days you just give them some new stuff, they move ahead, and even if it's wet and muddy, it doesn't not seem to be an issue. I guess another nice thing too is when they do take off the heavy stuff at night, they got a place to lay down. And they'll lay where those swaths were, because the snow is gone and there's a little bit of a cushion there from the other stuff. You know, maybe you don't want to make your swath too big that they're just plopping down and using that as a bed all the time. But when they glean it off the first time, they will lay down there. So they got a nice place to lay at night. And we've had the cows out there with 20 below weather for a week that one year. That year I got the data here. That was a whole week of 20 below. And
that was actually the last time I bedded cows. I felt bad for them. We put up portable windbreaks and we bedded behind those windbreaks. And I went out there, it had snowed then about a day after that. And the only thing we did was give the snow a really nice dry place to land because the cows were all out grazing. Not a single cow ever went and used that area. So we stopped bedding those cows out on there. We still will offer adequate windbreak. But if we bed those cows, they're never in there long enough because as soon as they're out of that windbreak, they're out grazing. So their habits are much more the same as you would see in the summer with big grazing events. Then they'll usually go stand behind the windbreak in the winter, whereas I would see in the summer they would normally be lounging in shade or something like that. So it's kind of interesting on how that's changed a little bit.
I guess the other thing too, when David and the guys here, Logan and Brad, set things up, we're we're grazing perpendicular to the windrows. We don't have windrow in the fence. We have it perpendicular, and there's a couple good reasons to do that. One is the fence rolls ahead so much better, so you don't get hung up in a windrow when you roll those Gallagher things. The other thing is, too, I think the cows find their feet a lot better too, because they know where they left off. When you roll it ahead and there's like a foot or two of snow there, they know where to start it and they tear right into it. It looks like you like took a snow blower and cleaned the pads off. And they spread out nice this way too. I mean, they kind of bunch up and they clean up the windrow, but that's what's going on. This is on the campus farm, about 90 cows up there. This is last winter. And if you watch the minute thing down here, it's minute 45 seconds. You've got the cows fed for 2 days and they're done. And it's no muss, no fuss.
The only thing you can pick on the sun is that doesn't time her walking back.
Yeah, I didn't time her back.
So,
So anyway, it's been pretty good. Now, I don't know, Brad, if you want to come up here and tell us how your systems work for you, you can do that too. And tell them what they'll be seeing.
Yeah, I guess, timing wise from feeding here, I've timed it. I can leave the shop and it's how far over there, about a couple miles. So I can leave here, go move the wire and be back here in 15 minutes. So that's not a real big time commitment, and you're only doing that every couple of days. So,
And a lot of times you just move one wire too. You'll go like on one half this
Yeah.
time and then you move the other half.
I have played with that a little bit, rather than moving one side and then getting the Ranger and driving the other side, I'll just move that one side, and the next time I go, just kind of keep working it back across at an angle, just one side at a time to cut down on a little bit of labor walking, but either way, works pretty easy.